In this video, I'm going to be making a birthday present for a very special person. It's going to be a jewelry box, and I'm going to be doing three things that I've never done before. The first is I'm going to be using hinges, and the second is I will be personalizing this box, and you'll just have to see what that means later in the video. And number three is I'm going to use the sewing machine at the end to create a nice bag for this to go into as part of the presentation. First, I need to mill up some oak and get everything all nice and flat and edges 90 degrees. And then I'm going to resaw it so that I get two nice pieces for the sides of the box. And after I resaw it, I'm going to mill it or plane it to rough thickness first. And then I'm going to let it sit for a couple of days because normally I find after I resaw it normally warps. And I want to wait and then mill it up one more time just before I start to use it. And the next few scenes are a little bit dark because I made a really beginner mistake here. I set my camera to A, which means aperture, not auto, and yeah, so. After I've got the lumber milled up to the final thickness, I use my shooting board. In this case, this is a mitering shooting board. And I put miters on all of the edges for the box. Rather than doing this on my table saw, I just seem to get a little bit better results this way. And then I put the box down. I use my jointer in this case. It just seems to work better. Get everything flat and straight before I put the tape on. And once I've got the tape on, I can take it over to my assembly table, flip it over, and I can start to put glue on it and fold it up. Now I've already cut the slots on the lower part and the upper part of each of those pieces, and the bottom slot accepts the bottom of the box. I've already put a rabbet around the bottom there, and I'm just dry fitting it here to make sure that everything fits perfectly before I start to put glue on it. Now once I've dry fit it and I'm happy with that, I put the glue on and spread that around before I close it all up. Now I'm going to let that sit for a while until the glue dries, and I'll check it for square just before I leave it. Now that the glue's dry, you can see as I remove the tape the really nice sharp edges that I got by using my shooting board. I really like this method. It also reduces the risk of tear out on the edge that I would have to then repair later. This just turns out much nicer. To reinforce those corners, I'm going to put splines in, and so here I'm just putting together some splines. I've got some walnut and some maple, and then another piece of walnut on top of that, and that will create my spline. I'll let this dry up, and when it's done, I'll cut it down to size. And I use my table saw and a spline jig to cut the splines into the box, into the corners, and I've just got some spacers there that I'm removing and moving the box over bit by bit until I get the right size for those splines to fit in. And now you can see they look a little bit like Oreo cookies there. I'm gluing in the splines. Once that's all dry, I'm going to use my Japanese pole saw to cut those off. What I do is on that top blade, the other side of the blade, I put a piece of tape, and that protects the box from getting scratched up on the side. I also tape around the splines before I cut, and that seems to help quite a bit and prevent any damage from the saw itself. Once I've got the splines cut off, I do touch it up with a little bit of sandpaper just to get everything nice and clean on those corners. Now I've got to cut the lid off of the box, and to do this I'm going to use the table saw to score the box. I'm not going all the way through the thickness. That's about a 12 millimeter wall, so I'm going just a little bit under that, and then I'll use a knife after that to separate that, and that makes it a little bit safer so that the blade doesn't in the table saw doesn't get clamped between the pieces. And there you can see the lid comes off pretty easily then with a knife. It does require a little bit of cleanup. There's usually a little bit of extra thin strips of wood that doesn't take too much time. A little bit of sandpaper to clean up those edges. And here I'm just checking the fit and looking at how that's going to work with the hinge. I've never put a hinge on a box before, so I have to think this through on how that could work. I'm building this box as a gift for somebody, and I really want to personalize it for them. And so I'm going to use the letter of their first name and try to make this out of wood, and I'll put that right here. I found this font, which happens to have an opening here, which should make it a lot easier because then I can get the bandsaw into some of this, and then I can use various other methods to clean out the waste in the middle there. To cut that letter out, I just use a little bit of spray adhesive on both the paper and the wood and apply the paper to the wood, and then that gives me my template to take over to the bandsaw. And it'll be a lot easier to do this if I'm not using a resaw blade. Once I get the shape cut out, I still have quite a bit of work to do. Sanding, I use my sander to do this. I use a hand sander, I use sandpaper, I use lots of different methods to get the final shape nice and clean. And a quick check on the lid, and that looks pretty good. I like that a lot. Before I glue that in, I'm actually going to surround the Kumiko with a little bit of a frame that's at the same level, so I think it should tie in nicely. Here, before I put the letter in, I've actually put a little bit of a guide here, a template to help me get it in the right place, and then I'll just put some glue on that, clamp it up, and let it sit before I come and clean it up. Now, because of the way I built this box, it has a little bit of a lip on the base, so I'm going to have to remove that lip in order to put the hinge in there. And on the lid, I'll have to build it up just a little bit in the back, and you'll see that in just a second. I just used a chisel to clean out that waste. And I'm also going to recess the hinge just a little bit. Once I'm happy with the fit and placement of the hinge on the bottom, I'm going to extend the lines over onto the corners. And that will allow me, I can then put the lid on top of this and use those knife marks to then transfer those over to the lid, and then I know that the hinge lines up perfectly. can see where I've added a little bit of material. I'll have to cut that down so it's at the same level. But I need this because that wall isn't 12 millimeters anymore, and once I get that cut down, it'll accept the hinge. After drilling some holes for the hinges, I go ahead and put the hinge on the lid first, and then I'll flip it over and put the lid onto the base. I just use a piece of tape to help position the lid and hold it in place while I attach the hinges to the base. And I really don't like the look of these hinges. They're a little bit small. The lid goes back a little bit too far. I'm afraid that it's eventually going to break at some point, so I'm really not happy with these. I'm going to have to redo them. I think what I'm going to do is go out, take these out, and find some wider hinges. I'm also going to clean up the hinges, the edges, so everything's perfectly square. I'll have to recut where I had the old hinges, and I'll have to also fill those holes, and I think it'll be a lot better. Well, for my first time applying hinges like this, I'd say it's not terrible. I'm still not 100% happy with the way that they look. I still think they look a little bit rough and not very clean. Maybe it's just the hinge, I don't know. But what's nice about these new hinges, though, is that the box now opens right at 90 or a little bit past 90. I think it'll be a lot more stable. And in the back, where I had to put the chamfer on the lid and the base to allow that to open like that, looks a lot nicer. It's the reveal isn't quite so big there. That's very nice. After I'm done with that, I just put on some shellac and some wax onto all of the parts, including the inserts for this box. And I'm also going to cut some leather out and put those in the inserts. And I made the dividers on the inserts removable so that she can decide how much space she needs, also in the lower part of the box. And now that the box is done, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm actually going to sew, and I'm going to use some pink fabric that I found, and I'm going to make a bag for this box to fit in. So for this, I'd never done this before. This seemed like the easiest way to do it, and so I'm just using a sewing machine for the very first time. I actually had to get a friend to help me to set this thing up, and there it is. I put a string in the bag. Very happy with that. I think it looks really nice.